Clive Palmer has been telling us for months and months to make Australia great again. He may do just that if through his preferences alone Labor are denied government. As I write in today's Australian newspaper on page 9, there was all this talk last week about the costing of Labor's policies. It was meaningless. Who has calculated the cost of ripping $387 billion of your money out of your pocket? That's what they're going to do. They'll either take it away from you or tax it. What did Chris Bowen say? If you don't like it, don't vote for us. How do you put a cost on standing negative gearing on its head at a time when the housing market's brittle and rents will go up? There'll be fewer investors in the market, so the price of your house, when you sell it, will go down. How do you put a cost on that to the people on Struggle Street? Then you save and invest, hoping you'll have something for yourself when you sell an asset or two, and there's a 50% increase in the capital gains tax. And the notion of self-funded retirees is that you won't have to rely on welfare. That's why they're called self-funded retirees. But no, deny them their entitlement, franking credits, prosper the lie that it's a gift, and stand hard-working Australians' retirement plans on their head. It's brutal and it's ruthless. Then there's energy policy. If it's all about carbon dioxide, which is absurd, it is the source of all plant life, then what the hell are we signing an economic suicide note for when the percentage of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is 0.04%? There must be a lot of stupid people out there if they believe this is going to damage the planet. But coal-fired electricity production only produces 32% of carbon dioxide emissions. Agriculture and transport produce 32%. Are we going to kill off the cattle herd, dairy and beef, because they break wind? If not, how do you get a 45% reduction in emissions? Do you take planes out of the sky? Cars off the road? Oh, just on cars? Another tax? If your car's going to emit more than 105 grams of CO2 per kilometre, you'll be taxed. And if you can ever afford an electric car, or whether you own a car or not, you'll have to have a charger installed in your house. Another tax. $8,000. This is mind-blowing vandalism of individual wealth and capital accumulation. In my story today, I quote David Scully from Marrickville, who wrote yesterday, "Say it for what it is, Bill. A tax on aspiration, inspiration and perspiration. The more successful you become, the lower the incentive for achievement." Oh, and don't forget superannuation. Mr Shorten's going to take another $34 billion out of that. Well, I think many people are saying thank God for Clive Palmer, who says we can make Australia great again. And he makes a lot of sense, and he's not a dope. He's on the line. Clive Palmer, good morning.
Good morning, Alan. How are you?
Well, thank you. Thank you for your time. Look, can I just revisit this one issue? Because following our interview last week, I got quite a bit of correspondence in relation to Coolum. And Tony wrote to say his view, his comment regarding access by owners to their units at Coolum is not true. Judy and I visited Coolum over the last couple of years and been denied access to even see if our unit still exists. We've been a long-term owner since 1987. And I've got a stack of those. So it's obvious that people own these entities. One says, we bought this 20 years ago with the intention that when we retired, we'd stay there regularly. Access has been denied for the last 10 years. We're now 75 and 70. We'd like to get access and enjoy what we bought. What do you say to them?
Well, first up, I say that all the units have got nothing to do with the resort. And that, the units are all individual body corporate. So if they've visited the resort, they've asked the resort to get access. Well, it's true. Our land doesn't go through the units. They have to go through their body corporate for access and enter by the body corporate's road. There's a lot of confusion about that, but each of these units are separate body corporates, like any other development in Queensland. They all have their own independent legislation, and they all have their own access.
So what do I tell these people?
Well, you should tell them to contact the chairman of their body corporate if they've got trouble entering that area, and make sure that he makes it available to them.
Okay, I'll do that. I'll do that. See what's happening, because we'll...
each body corporate.
Okay.
That's how they go about it.
Leave that, and if need be, I'll come back to you. Now, you're saying, rightly, Australians pay more for electricity than New Yorkers. We could solve the electricity problem with nuclear power. It's cheap, reliable energy with zero emissions. How do we do that?
Well, first we changed the law. All sides of politics have banned the development of nuclear power in Australia. We've seen in Japan, in Europe, and the United States, it's flourished, and it's provided them with a low cost of energy and a great advantage when it comes to manufacturing and trade and employment. So all we're asking for really is Australia treats itself the way we would be treated if we were in the United States, Japan, or Europe, our major trading partners, or China for that matter. That way we can compete. Why have Australian workers with their hands tied behind their back? Why have Australian industry paying such high prices? And why having our older people die at night because they can't afford heating in Canberra and Tasmania? It's a national disgrace.
And why, of course, we could say, do you export uranium to America, Japan, China and Europe and so on, and yet here we have energy poverty?
Well, you're exporting our prosperity, our children's jobs. And we've just got to be rational about it. The Greens, Di Natale, all of those people don't know what they're doing. Di Natale was on Q&A on Monday night telling the Labor Party what they'd do about New Start and telling them what he'd insist on. If there's a change in government, it will be a Green Labor government. They've joined at the hip with the Labor Party. They'll introduce death taxes, so husbands won't know what they can leave their wives and their children when they die. It's a disgrace. Australians have got to get together and do something about it. As Winston Churchill said, no country can tax itself to prosperity. Taxing yourself, a country trying to get to prosperity by taxation, is like a man standing in a bucket trying to pull himself up by the handles.
You've said, do you think people have got poor memories? You said in relation to the Labor Party recently that Labor has, quote, destroyed the country once before under the Rudd and Gillard governments.
Well, that's clear. That's what happened, and that's why Tony Abbott got elected as Prime Minister. That's why there's a backlash to that happening. And, of course, the main issue in this election is the economy, and that's what people get, what they have to spend every day. If Labor increases taxes like they're saying they will, what they're doing is bringing down wages. We don't want wage reductions in this country. We want to increase wages by increased productivity and increased achievement. No one's looking at that. If we want increased wages, we've got to produce more. We've got to be more competitive. And Australians can do it. Japan's become the world's third largest economy by using Australian energy and Australian resources. Yet Australians don't use their own energy. They don't use their own resources. They send it overseas.
No, well, gas is classic, isn't it? I mean, we have to pay an international price for gas. There's no gas reservation policy here. That's pretty simple, isn't it? You'd say to someone, all right, well, you can have as much gas as you like, but we're going to keep 25% of this for domestic consumption, so we'll have cheap energy. How come someone doesn't do that?
Well, many Australians would be surprised to know that Australia is the world's biggest exporter of gas, not the Middle East. Yet we're paying prices for our electricity twice what they pay in New York. It's a disgrace.
What about, everywhere you turn, I mean, you've ads everywhere from you making these points. I mean, the $387 billion of tax increases or taking money from us with benefits we already enjoy is just the tip of the iceberg, isn't it? I mean, you've then got, as I mentioned before, a housing tax. If we're going to sort of then have negative gearing, you've got people paying high rent. If you're then going to look at franking credits, we're stealing money from pensioners. Wherever you turn, these people are seeking to enter every crevice of our lives, but they're in front of the polls. Why?
I don't know. I don't believe the polls, Alan. I think people are more sensible than that. I mean, imagine death duties, where 40% of your wealth, that's the wealth of every Australian, disappears to the government every generation. Children lose their inheritance. Men and women that have worked together in a marriage lose that partnership when they lose one of them. Why should they be taxed like that? That's the biggest tax grab ever. That's half the wealth of all Australians nearly going every time somebody dies. And at a time of grief, you need more support. You need more help. These people don't care about you. They just care about their entitlements they get in Parliament. And that's all they care about, really. They don't care about the Australian people. That's why I've spent $50 million of my money at 65, because I want Australians to know what's happening. I want them to have a chance to fight for their country and to stop the Labor Party destroying the lives of the people of this country.
Franking credits?
Well, franking credits is just a grab against people that have relied on Paul Keating saying they could rely on franking credits. We can't trust what Paul Keating says. It's just a grab to destroy our elderly citizens because they can't defend themselves. People over 65, going on to 80, have a limited time in the electorate, have limited power and limited voting, so they want to punish those people to give it to other Labor suffragans. They're consultants that they employ and they will employ with all this money that they want to spend. Negative people have never developed anything.
They're unapologetic, aren't they? I mean, when they then say they're almost going to take over the Fair Work Commission, which they appointed and was meant to be an independent umpire, but a 20% increase to childcare workers, so everyone else will get in the queue, what will be the consequence of that for the economy?
Well, I just abolished the Fair Work Commission because they appointed it to be independent. It became too independent. They didn't like it. Independence or science from Labor and Greens means that you agree with us or you're out. So I'll just abolish the Fair Work Commission. They'll just legislate wages. They'll just say what has to happen in the economy. And, of course, how can the government pay private enterprise workers in the healthcare industry? This is a move for communism and socialism. It's shocking. You know, what's going to be the next step? That's the forerunner. Then they'll be paying all of our wages that will be dependent on the government, and we'll spiral down to like they did in Eastern Europe. And that's what's going to happen to this country, and we've got to stop it.
Capital gains tax.
Well, you're destroying people's wealth and their incentive to do better. We've got to make the pie bigger in Australia for all Australians to participate in. We want our economy to be greater, and we want to have a higher standard of living for everyone. We don't want to divide Australians. Look at the negative gearing tax. What that does, it makes Australians can no longer claim interest on their home, their property investments as a tax deduction. But Bill Shorten lets foreign corporations do it. They can go on doing it, so Australians get pushed down further and further because Bill Shorten really supports the big end of town. That's the guy who really is a suffragette and will do anything for anybody. So we've got to stop it.
50% renewable energy target, 45% emissions reductions. We've gone mad. I mean, that's a suicide note, economic suicide note.
Well, it just means our industries will be destroyed. You know, I've created over 60,000 jobs in the economy in my life by trying hard to invest money in risk capital and by being the most competitive in our industries. If you go back to the Paris Agreement. What's the Paris Agreement? It's not a real agreement at all. It's just a memorandum where people put different obligations to it. What's Pakistan's obligation? Their emissions are going to go up, and then one day they'll come down. It's worth nothing. Every country's got a different commitment. What's China's commitment? Our emissions will continue to double every year to 2030, then they'll level off. That's what the US Treasury said they would do anyway. What is India's commitment? Well, we'll reduce emissions by 2% a year. They currently reduce them by 4% a year, so they're committing to go slower. What do? We'll halve our economy, put our people out in the street, and cut our welfare, cut all of our government expenditure and our possibilities for people. Well, they won't cut government expenditure, but possibilities for the private sector to grow and provide jobs, real jobs to produce.
But the real lie here, isn't it, is carbon dioxide. I mean, carbon, source of all plant life. It's not the scourge of the world, but even if it were, 0.04% of the atmosphere is carbon dioxide. How do these sorts of lies prosper?
By a lot of left-wing journalists, Alan. That's how they prosper. The reality of it is, of that 0.04%, only 3% of it is made by man to start with.
That's correct.
Australia only makes 0.1% of that.
Correct.
So all this is about nothing. There are 491 power stations in construction in the world at the moment, coal-fired power stations. There's another 705 that are being permitted. We have 6 here in Australia providing 70% of our energy, and they want to destroy those two, shut down the coal industry. They want to put 50,000 workers out of jobs in North Queensland. And why do they want to do it? I don't know, really. It's just to destroy your own country. Australians have got to get together. This is a real challenge to our living standards. We'll go back to being a third world country, which we were in the 1950s after World War II. So many people have fought so hard to give Australians a better standard of living. They've got to get together now and tell Bill Shorten he just can't do it.
Right, just before you go, 20 seconds. What are you saying to people Saturday?
I'm saying vote for anyone other than the Labor-Green alliance. That's what I'm saying. Just send them a message once and for all that we want our country to be prosperous, we want it to have a real future, and we want to have our children and our families to live a much better life. And secondly, we don't want to have a death tax that splits our family and takes away our wealth.
Good on you. Good on you. Good to talk to you, and thank you for your time.
Thanks, Alan.
There you are, Clive Palmer. No notes, no nothing. Not stupid. Not stupid.